This episode is a little different than what you're used to. Today, we mark a transition. After nearly a decade as director of the Peace Research Institute Oslo, Henrik Urdal is stepping down. And stepping into the role is Nina Græger, a scholar of international relations and security policy, most recently at the University of Copenhagen. They are both joining me on this special episode. Together, we'll reflect on what it means to lead a Peace Research Institute at a time of deep global uncertainty and explore the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. We'll also ask how peace research fits into a world that often seems to be heading in the opposite direction. And yes, we'll get their take on the rise in global conflicts, the future of the transatlantic alliance, and the growing tension between peace and defense research agendas. I am Arnaud Siad, and you're listening to Prios Peace in a Pod. Henrik, Nina, welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a bit of a special episode. Rather than focusing on a single research topic, as we usually do on Prios Peace in a Pod, I wanted us to reflect today on the transition from your leadership, Henrik, to that of Nina, our new director here at PRIO, and what it means to guide a Peace Research Institute at a time of deep global uncertainty. We will also get your take on today's world, but to get us started, Henrik, you were PRIO Director since 2017. What has it meant for you to lead this Peace Research Institute for nearly a decade?
Thanks, Arnaud. This has indeed been the greatest privilege and honor of my professional life. I've been at PRIO for almost all of my work life. I arrived into PRIO as an MA student back in 2000. And I've seen the metamorphosis of this institute go from being a fairly small, yet international recognized research environment at that time to become the professionalized and very influential institution that we are today. And only in the past 8 years that I've been overseeing PRIO, we've had a tremendous growth in both personnel and finances. And we see that our research is resonating very well in the world. We're able to get the word about our research out, including through this podcast, which is now reaching very widely all across the globe. So it's been a period then with some major challenges in the world and some major challenges both to the globe and to PRIO as an institution. And I'm, of course, thinking specifically about the pandemic that struck from 2020 and then the full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine. So that has, of course, been important aspects of my period, but for most of the time, I've experienced being a director of PRIO as an enormous privilege, allowing me to get to interact with a lot of very bright, interesting people, and being able to promote agendas for knowledge-based policymaking in areas that matter. So I've been very privileged, and I've been enjoying it so much.
And this is not just a research institute, it's the Peace Research Institute Oslo. It focuses on peace and conflict research, and it has the ambition to speak to the world and produce research that is global in scope. But there is, and I say this as a foreigner here in Norway, perhaps something distinctly Norwegian about it. So, Henrik, what makes PRIO different from other research institutes? What makes it unique? And perhaps to you, is there something particularly Norwegian about it?
First, I want to say that the uniqueness of PRIO is that there is an enormous engagement and pride in what we do. PRIO staff, they want their work to, their research to make a difference in the world. And PRIO is an institution that has impact, and this is a shared vision, I should say, between, among all PRIO staff, both those who are working in research as well as those who work as support staff. And then there is a sense of quality at PRIO. We're scoring high on all evaluations of PRIO research, both in a Norwegian and international context. We're publishing in world-leading journals. We have the highest density of European Research Council grant, which is a mark of high quality. And then we own and publish two international leading journals, the Journal of Peace Research and Security Dialogue. We're engaged in innovative solutions, developing projects that are on the research frontier. We're international. Last time we counted, there were more than 30 different nationalities at PRIO, and we've always had English as our working language, and we have an international orientation in everything that we do.
Nina, this is the first time I'm having you on the podcast, so welcome. And you are now our new director, but this isn't your first rodeo at PRIO. You were a young researcher then, and you started your career here, I believe. And until recently, you were professor and head of the Department of Political Science at the University of Copenhagen. So what made you think this is the right job for me and the right time to come to Oslo to lead PRIO?
Good question. No, I always thought about PRIO as being the research institute in Oslo, which really is pursuing research excellence, as well as having a purpose. And I think that's really important for me. Like Henrik said, PRIO has a fantastic standing, both internationally and in Norway, and also is known for its very independent, top-quality research, also within areas that are really, really important to society, especially today, but also more generally. And I think that the fact that PRIO engages with questions that decision makers and stakeholders really, really find interesting and important also makes the job as director very important. So I think PRIO has its standing, interesting area of research, and important mission, I think, in these times. So those were sort of the basic pull factors for me. It's also great to be back in Norway, I must admit. I've been almost 6 years in Denmark at the Copenhagen University, and while Copenhagen is great and all the Norwegians love Copenhagen, it's also a little bit of a different place to work. So I think this is really, really great.
And Nina, it's fair to say that you're taking the helm at a rather difficult time. The national purses are tightening. A lot of the resources are being directed to defense sector, and funding in academia has always been, of course, an issue for many researchers, but there is a sense that this is not about to get any better. So, Nina, why is it important that PRIO exists and research here be funded? What role do you see for PRIO in addressing and understanding the global crisis we face today?
That was a lot of questions, actually.
I'll
try to respond to some of them. I think that PRIO actually is engaging and also needs perhaps to engage more with the burning issues of today. I mean, it's about peace, it's about violent conflict, and it's about war in Europe. We have been so lucky to live in a very peaceful part of the world. That is not the case anymore since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, but also prior to that with the annexation of the Crimea in 2014. We saw sort of what was coming, although we were all a bit surprised when the intervention actually came. But I think that PRIO has a different perspective and can sort of come out with a different voice than a lot of the other research institutes in Norway and as well as abroad. So I think there is something there in itself. And I also think that PRIO may ask the questions that perhaps decision makers, policy makers cannot or will not for several reasons. And also, of course, tell them to or give them questions that they might not think about. So I think that is something that is very attractive to me. It also requires courage, of course, to stand out and also to be visible in the media in Norway. And I think that there's someone, and when I say someone, I mean basically research institutes, has to talk about peace and how to move beyond war and violent conflict in the situation we're in our neighborhood, so to speak. I think that PRIO has a particular mission to play there, and also a long time of experience with both research-wise and otherwise in how you move beyond that and what would be the conditions for peace in the long term. And of course, also when it comes to negotiating peace agreement, mediation and all of that, there is competence in this house. An experience which I think will be important to draw on. And I think in many senses, this is sort of the moment in time for PRIO when we actually need PRIO more than ever.
That leads us to the broader picture. According to data from the Conflict Trends Report, which we featured in our last podcast episode last month, the world is experiencing a surge in violence not seen since World War II. 2024 saw the highest numbers of state-based armed conflicts in more than 7 decades, and certainly there is a lot to despair about when we look at the headlines. To me, what is perhaps the most difficult to understand is the absolute disregard for international norms and rules that we are witnessing all over the place. It seems unprecedented. But Henrik, you look at it from, as a peace and conflict researcher. So how do you see this moment we are in? Are we truly in uncharted territory, or are there echoes of the past?
I would certainly say that we're not in uncharted territory, and this is indeed echoes of the past. And of course, these echoes aren't going to be exactly the same way as they were in the past. But we have been in this territory before. I actually came into peace research in the sort of the aftermath of the last, if you like, wave of violence at the beginning of the 1990s. I was introduced to the field of peace research through my work actually on Srebrenica, the genocide in Srebrenica. I worked for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and we're marking today the 30th commemoration of the genocide in Srebrenica from July 1995. So that was my way into peace research to begin with, and then this marked a period of very significant violence just after the aftermath of the end of the Cold War, and with very many violent conflicts, including the last major violent conflict on European territory in the Balkans. So as you said, we've just had the launch now of the conflict trends report that PRIO is publishing every year, based on data from the Uppsala conflict data program. It shows that we have the highest number now of conflicts that has been recorded since the Second World War, which is the period that we have relatively good data for. That doesn't mean that there is more violence overall than there has ever been, because what we see now is that there are more local conflicts in the same countries that already have conflict. So the number of countries that experience conflict isn't really increasing as much. And the number of people killed has now, it is high by sort of historical standards after the end of the Cold War. But if we go back to the 1980s and 1970s, there were spikes of violence and a lot of people killed, and with a relative likelihood of dying in conflict being higher than what we see today. So you can think of Iran, Iraq, for instance, in the 1980s. But then we're seeing greater fragmentation. We're also seeing worrying signs with states meddling into other sort of conflicts in other areas. So 40% roughly of all internal conflicts now have participation by other states. They're internationalized, as we say. And that means that they, on average, last longer and they're more violent. We're also seeing now that there is an increase in internationalized conflict, so between states, with both, of course, the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, but also wars between Israel and Iran. There have been strikes there, and also in 2025, the conflict between Pakistan and India. So there is there are reasons to be concerned. We have been here before. There are, historical precedents, but I would also say that there are, we're unlike, for instance, the time between the world wars, where there was a lack of institutions, a lack of structure. We are now in a different and better place in that we do have international structures that handle issues of war and peace. They're all under pressure, but it is a different situation than before the Second World War. We're also seeing levels of democracy that are higher than before the end of the Cold War. So even there, the situation is after better. And we are also seeing, the past decades have had profound improvements in levels of education, in levels of health, of livelihoods, that all support a more peaceful and stable world order. It's just that there are other factors at play now that is challenging that. But in many ways, we're in a much better place than we've been in decades. But we're seeing a spike in violence now that we all hope there will be human agency being able to solve.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, Henrik, that the picture may be bleak, but that there have been serious improvements in building an institutional framework globally, and that there have been improvements in democracy levels, education, etc., and that ultimately we are in a better place to deal with those challenges we're facing today. I think that nuance is certainly important for our listeners. Nina, and this might be a bit of an unfair question, but if you had to name one particular issue that peace researchers should grapple with in the coming years, what would it be?
I think I would like to follow up on what Henrik just said, really to fight for keeping a focus on the global order, to have international institutions that are strong, and also to have like a global order which we recognize, to focus on the importance of the rule of law, orderly relations internationally. I mean, that is the first line of defense for small and middle-sized countries. And then if I could add one more thing, I think visibility. It's really important that peace researchers, take up space in the Norwegian media, but also beyond that. And that is something we also have to work with in a very, dedicated way. They are already there. We are already there. But still, I think there's untapped potential.
Nina, you mentioned the current US administration, and in your academic career, you've explored European, Nordic, foreign and security policy, and that's very much in the spotlight these days with the EU's 800 billion plan to boost up defense, and a sense that the transatlantic alliance may not be as strong as it once was, all of which we explored, by the way, in a previous episode in May of the podcast with our colleague Bruno Oliveira Martins. But how do you assess the state of the transatlantic alliance today? And in your view, is NATO still something Europeans can rely on?
Good question. I think that have seen changes in the transatlantic alliance and the transatlantic relations that we could not, foresee only a few years back. It is really difficult, especially seen from a Nordic and Norwegian perspective, because when I say we, I mean Norway, and the government has relied really heavily on the alliance and the very close bilateral relationship with the US in the defense of Norway. I think that NATO can still be relied on, but I think that NATO will have to be much more European in its outlook. I'm not saying that the EU should take over from NATO, but I think that the Europeans in NATO should really step up, which they are, or we are, doing to some extent, but make that into a more European organization would make it less, how would I put it, subject to US policies, and we do not know who will be the next president. Could be even a person that is worse than the current one, if I may say so, on air.
I want to ask you both a broader question about the role of peace research in today's funding environment, something we touched upon earlier. For many researchers, there is a concern that peace research is becoming really defense research, meaning there is now going to be a focus and emphasis on funding projects that are about the military, defense, etc. And this sort of goes back to what you said earlier, Nina, about, thinking of peace research as something a bit distinct from what we think of in terms of defense and the military. So this is not just a question for PRIO, by the way. A lot of academic institutes and academics around the world are facing the same thing. Do you share these concerns about the future of peace research and its independence from defense agendas? Let's start with you, Henrik.
Sure, yeah, and I think as we've touched upon already, there is we're in a new territory now compared to only a few years back. With both financially and politically, the outlook is quite different, and we as a research institute, we need to respond to that and be able to come up with good research in response to a changing world situation. Of course, as a research institute, PRIO has a little bit of we have fewer degrees of freedom than the universities, in the sense that we're dependent on someone being willing to fund our research. But I think it's important for every researcher, but of course peace researchers in particular these days, to be contributing to shape the agenda by developing ideas. Then we are in a little bit of a paradoxical situation, because as as Nina said initially, there is a greater need for PRIO's research than ever, perhaps, at the same time as we're seeing funding opportunities going down, both from public funders and from more conventional research funders, but also from ministries. So we are in a situation where there is a greater need, but also less funding to provide for it. We're also in a situation now where we see that there are tensions between security research that is becoming more closed and secretive. I think it is, there's clearly some areas that need to be protected. We cannot be naive. At the same time, it is extremely important for the quality of research that there is also open and transparent research in the security sector, and that we're not securitizing, if you like, all of the research in this domain, that we can also look at societal resilience, societal security through open and available research. That makes it better, that makes it more international. I thought I'd mention sort of a few examples also of PRIO research in this domain. We have a major research project now on Russian approaches to peace processes, and while that may seem a bit far-fetched at the moment, the day will come where Russia will have to sit down at the table with the Ukrainian to negotiate a settlement, and at that point, knowing understanding Russia's behavior in process like that, that is going to be helpful for trying to help us navigate in that situation. Another area is the role of AI, both the government of AI and the way that AI can be used for peace rather than for conflict undermining democracy. We have a couple of projects now at PRIO that use AI for peaceful purposes, one being the so-called REMWar project, which is going to monitor ceasefires and document war crimes using remote sensing and acoustic devices developed for earthquake monitoring, and now to look at explosions. So fantastic sort of new tool that we can use. Another is the so-called VIEWS project, where we're doing conflict early warning systems, which is both helping us to try to prevent conflict, but also to step up humanitarian efforts in the situations where we see that conflict is likely to hit. So these are both very advanced and academically novel projects at the same time as they have a very applied side, which I think is precisely where peace research want to be, because we want to make sure that we're at the research frontier at the same time as these are projects that can make a difference on the ground.
Nina?
Yeah, good points there, Henrik. Well, I think that it's in PRIO's DNA, so to speak, to remain independent from the defense agendas. That said, of course, if there's a lot of money or funds running into that part of that research area, that is something that also PRIO should look at. So my concern would be that yes, there will be a lot of funds, but they will not go to research. They will go to other parts of society and to the defense sector itself within procurement and all of that. I think that PRIO's role here is to maybe ask different types of questions than those that are asked by maybe other research institutes or also by the authorities themselves. I also think that we could look into, for instance, defense procurement. I mean, what about transparency of decisions? I think Henrik also mentioned that. Where is democracy in this? I mean, what is the time span of the investments? I mean, we know now we're all talking about spending, billions of money on defense and procurement. We don't know how long this situation will last. I mean, in 20 years, we might be in a different situation, maybe even in 10. And then we have spent all these money and invested so much in defense for targeted towards a particular type of attack or threat. So there are many things here that we, as peace researchers, could sort of think loud about and also come up with different types of advice to the governments. So I think that is one thing. Another thing is total defense, which is something that the Nordic countries are very much engaged in, also historically, and where the civilian components, infrastructure, are really important as well, and which maybe makes it less, difficult for peace researchers to deal with. So I think there are many aspects here that we could plug into, while at the same time be aware of who we are.
As we wrap this episode, and as we say goodbye to you, Henrik, for now, would you share with us your most memorable moment at PRIO, a moment that really stays with you?
I couldn't limit it to one, so I have two. I need to, of course, highlight the annual discussions of the Nobel Peace Prize, which follows the publication of the annual PRIO Director's list of Nobel favorites. For me, this has been an opportunity to emphasize and promote all of the very important and good contributions to peace that we often forget about when we have these discussions about the ills of the world. That there are so many bright and important contributions to make the world more peaceful. And of course, it was a very special moment for me with the announcement of the 2023 prize to Nargis Mohammadi, who was the candidate that was on the top of my list that year. So that's a special moment. Another was the opportunity I had to serve as an expert witness, giving testimony to the International Court of Justice in the case that the DRC Congo requested reparations from Uganda for Uganda's intervention into the war in the Congo. And then my report and testimony was concerning the number of deaths that Uganda was responsible for in Congo. And so we use data that we produce, and the same data that we have in the annual global conflict report. to say something about the extent of debts, and that was used directly into the ruling of the ICJ and informing the decision about the amount of the reparations that Uganda had to pay.
And Henrik, if you could talk to yourself back in 2017 when, you took over the leadership of PRIO, and knowing what you know now, what would you say to young and fresh Henrik taking on the role of director? What advice would you have given to yourself?
That probably would have been a week-long conversation. Of course, this has been a period that has been marked, as I said, with a succession of crises and major changes. So there has never been a dull day at PRIO for this 8-year period. So I guess my advice would have been to stay calm and say to myself that no matter what comes your way, know that there will be ways out of this crisis, yet another crisis. And then I think we have tackled most of these challenges in a fairly good way, but of course the adrenaline has been running high at times.
Nina taking notes. Nina, what are you most excited about as you start your tenure as PRIO Director? Is there a part of the job in particular that you really look forward to?
I think that Henrik also again mentioned it as the Nobel Peace Prize. Guessings and engagement with that is something that I look forward to, also with quite a lot of excitement, I would say. In general, I just think that PRIO is such a great research community and also has a very sound culture. I think that all the engaged researchers here in itself will be like a blessing for any director to engage with on a daily basis and to lead. So I look really much forward to that. And also the very global outlook of PRIO. One thing is that it's very international, but it's also, looking beyond the northern hemisphere to the global south. And we tend to forget about that when we are so preoccupied with the conflicts and wars in our neighborhood. And I think it's really important to, hold on to that. So I think there are so many great things to do in this job. So, yes.
Henrik, on behalf of all our colleagues here at PRIO, thank you for your years of service. And Nina, welcome to PRIO. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This wraps up Season 2 of PRIO's Peace in a Pod. We're taking a break over the summer, and the podcast will be back with more stories, more research, and more voices working for peace. Until then, find out more about our research, policy briefs, commentaries, and events on PRIO.org. As ever, thanks for listening.